This is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be going over a Driftwood LNG Phase 1 valuation model for Tellurian. This was requested from the Discord that I'm in, and they wanted me to share the spreadsheet I had for my valuation, for my cash flow model. I decided to clean it up and make it a little bit nicer, I hope, and make it shareable. The link is in the description of this video. And so what I'm going to be doing today is walking through this model that I have and explaining what each of the lines mean and giving you, hopefully enough explanation so that you can use this as a basis for your own research and your own valuation model. Before I begin, let me remind you that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in Tellurian, so this video should be for your entertainment purposes only, because I could be wrong about everything I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So this is what I'm going to be going over today. Hi, Transient Stacker. Thanks for hopping on the stream. I'm going to be going over the Tellurian Driftwood LNG Phase 1 sort of valuation model that I have here. After I get through this, I'm happy to talk about, whatever, if anybody has other stuff on their mind. But that's what I'm going to go through first, because I intend for this video to be a reference for folks who use this sheet, if anybody, so chooses to do so. Hi, Brian. Thanks for hopping on. So this is there are two tabs of the sheet. The first tab just has a little bit of documentation. How you can use it. Again, there's a link in the description of this video if you're joining from the stream and watching the video. But regardless, you ought to be able to open this up in a view-only mode and then go up to File and make a copy, and then you can save your own copy as long as you have, I think, a Google account. You can save it to your own Google Drive and then modify it to your heart's content from there. So the model is actually in the second tab here, and I broke it up in a couple different sections, and a lot of this is going to just be, or some of this is using numbers from Tellurian's numbers and sort of the structure of the model from Tellurian's corporate presentation, and some of it's, some other stuff that I've sort of joined in here. So going through this, the first section here is about my assumptions about the overall project structure and just a couple things about the company to begin with, right? And so we have what is the total cost of the Driftwood project, and then what is the financing and interest costs that they're going to incur during that time period where they're developing and building Driftwood LNG Phase 1. This is pretty straightforward and comes directly off of what they have here. They break it out into a couple different pieces. I sort of lumped these three lines together into one value, and then I have another line for this if you want to play with those separately. So that is what these two lines represent, and that's effectively the full cost for Driftwood LNG Phase 1, the full development costs. Then I have a parameter here for what portion of that, what portion of the Driftwood project do we think is going to be financed by debt? And my assumption here is that whatever percent is in here, the remainder is going to be paid in cash by Tellurian, either through cash that they already have or that they're going to generate, or through, them raising more equity. And so I'll get through some of those parameters later on here. I have a section here for Driftwood costs already paid. This, let me go ahead and put this. This is in billions of dollars. And this is a pretty small number now. If someone is using this, in the future, maybe another quarter or two, the amount of costs that have already been paid towards Driftwood might be substantial depending on how things go. So I put it in here as a parameter. I have the current fully diluted share count in millions of shares. And I think this is correct. I think there's about 662 million shares outstanding right now. If you include all of the convertible debt, if you were to convert it all, I think that's going to be, here. And obviously that's not all converted at the moment, but, I'm counting it all up here so that later on when we want to divide things by the number of shares, this is the basis. I also put in a line item here for how many shares do you think they're going to issue, presumably to the board and to executives, between now and then when you actually want to value this. And I put in, arbitrarily, I put in 20 million shares that I think they're going to be handing out to executives for bonuses and compensation, whatever. Clearly you can have an assumption that could be way higher, way lower. That's, I just put in a number here to have something. Again, feel free to put in what you think. I also have a parameter here for how much money do you think they're going to value from their gas production and their gas sales, their current operations between now and when they actually start liquefying gas and shipping LNG. And so right now I put in a number where I think, I think this is fairly conservative given current gas prices, but maybe not. Maybe you feel differently. But I think, about $700 million in cash flow over what would this be? 2023, 2024, and 2025, basically. Let's just even call it, 300 million, 200 million, 200 million. And in terms of gas profits, right? Not just revenues, but also profits that they could actually use and fund towards Driftwood. So, and then I have a value here for how much of their current cash do you think they have that could be used towards Driftwood. Sorry, I should format this number here. My bad. There you go. So that one's properly formatted. And then right now they have a lot of cash on the books. I'm assuming that they can use, again, this is my number, about $600 million of that cash that they currently have directly paid towards Driftwood development costs. So that is sort of the overall project structure and just some basic things about the company that give you a starting point. Then I have a bunch of calculated numbers here for, some calculations around the project financing. So I added up those two lines above to get the total project cost. I, carried forward the amount that I had, up here for what's already paid. And then to say this is how much money is remaining on the project. I use that percentage above to determine how much is going to have to be debt, and then also how much is going to have to be equity. And so I looked at, again, cash that they currently have or that they're going to produce through gas operations. I just assume that that's going to be a part of the equity portion. And then the remaining amount, subtract those two, that would, with these numbers I have here, this would be a shortfall of $3.7 billion that Tellurian would need for the equity portion. And so right now, I'm assuming that I know that they can do a whole bunch of complicated ways to raise money for the equity portion, but right now I am saying that, no matter what they do, I think most of that is going to boil down to something that is convertible to common shares. And so if I just sort of squint and I say it's basically just issuing common shares, just horse of a different color. This parameter here is at what price, what's the effective share price for that conversion for whatever they do to raise the equity, so that when we say they're going to raise $3.7 billion, what are we dividing by to determine how many shares that would create? And so right now, this is the share price I put in. I think I carried that forward from this was the effective price of the existing convertible debt that they raised. If you take out all the fees and the discounts that they got, I think this is effectively the share price that folks would eventually be buying at if those notes do get converted. And so all of those assumptions that I have in here right now would mean that Tellurian would issue an additional, 816 million shares to fund the rest of the equity portion. So that is, sort of one big chunk of the puzzle here. Another one is all about their feed gas. And so, this is just how much feed gas are they going to need for Driftwood LNG Phase 1. I put in a number here for how much do I think Tellurian production, I think TPC is Tellurian Production Corporation, I think. Maybe I got that wrong, but it's the arm of the company that is actually producing gas. How much do I think they're going to be producing themselves by the time Driftwood LNG starts up? And I put this in BCF per day. And, I did just a sort of some napkin math and looked at their current production and then how much their the new wells that they're drilling and such, and sort of just guessed a little bit. Again, that's all we can really do for some of these things is, sort of do some napkin math and then guess. And I put this at 0.4 BCF per day. And that, how much does it cost them to source this gas? This was a number I got from their corporate presentation, $2 per MMBTU. I think they have this. Oh, they must get rid of it on this one. I think they had it in their prior presentation, but it's, they had $2 per MMBTU if they are producing themselves. Yeah, it's right here. That's this $2 over here. And then, they put in number $4 if they're sourcing it, if they're buying it from Henry Hub, but I have a different number here. But I just used their sourcing costs here, $2 per MMBTU. Again, maybe that's wrong. I actually probably could have done a better job by looking at their filings. It's kind of hard to tell right now though, because they're sort of, they're drilling so much at the same time that they're producing. So it's hard to get actual good numbers here. Anyways, so if we then carry that forward, we do some calculations on that, right? Then we can say how much they are actually spending each year to produce the gas and how much gas they have remaining that they're going to have to purchase on the open market and at Henry Hub prices presumably. And so I put a parameter here for how much do you think the average Henry Hub price is going to be in dollars per MMBTU. Then you multiply those two and say this is how much it's going to cost them to buy that gas at Henry Hub per year in billions of dollars. And then you add up how much they had to purchase and their cost for producing their own gas to supply all of the total feed gas they need for Driftwood LNG phase 1, and that comes up with this number here on row 30. So that is this section all about feed gas. Then I put in the next section is all about their LNG revenues, right? And we know the structure of their contracts. They're based off of JKM and TTF, at least the current contracts that they have, the sales and purchase agreements. We know that they're based off of TTF, JKM with some discounts built in. And I put in basically parameters here for all of that. And I put in a parameter here for how much do you think is going to be sold at JKM, right? How many million tons per year, how much at TTF. And then, what do you think the JKM price, on average is going to be, and same for the TTF price. And so I put all of those in here, and for the numbers, the discount numbers, we have no idea what those are. I totally guessed here. For both of them, I put it at 10% and a 10%, and then also a $2 discount off of that. Again, maybe you think the numbers are different. Again, this is where not only am I not a financial professional, I have no direct experience in the industry, so I have no idea what would be, typical values here or appropriate values. I just kind of put these in. One other note here is you can actually say how many million tons per year you think are going to be produced and sold at each index. And but the non-obvious thing here is this doesn't have to add up to 11. And in fact, probably you should put in numbers that do not add up to more than 11, but I actually put in numbers that add up to slightly less. And I put this line here so that you can sort of eyeball it and say, how much of that phase 1 capacity are you accounting for in your model here? Because I think it's unrealistic to say that they're going to be, at 100% capacity all the time. So right now I put it at 95%. Maybe that's even too optimistic. I don't know. Maybe these should be 5 and 5, or some lower numbers. This is just what I stick in. Right. Presumably it's going to be at least summing up to 9 because that's what they have contracted. But that's something just to keep in mind. And again, the shift might actually be, or this mix between TTF and JKM could be drastically different. We really don't have the insight into what that split is today. But all of that lets you then, multiply it out by their capacity, or I guess, the capacity as noted here in the parameters, and then get how much dollars per year in LNG revenues are they going to get. Actually, this isn't the total. This would be the total. Each of these line items are for the gas sold at JKM and TTF. And this line here on line 46 that starts the next section is the total LNG revenue that just is sort of carried forward from that LNG revenue section. On the cash flow model here, we have the total LNG revenue, and then we have the cost of their gas in billions of dollars per year, right? That comes from this whole section here. That was that sort of final output of that one. We also have what it costs them to transport the gas to Driftwood and to liquefy it. I again took this number here, $1 per MMBTU, from this prior sort of example model they had in their older presentation. Hopefully this is still an accurate number. I don't know. Again, feel free to plug in what you think is realistic here. Multiply by the capacity, and that comes out to $550 million per year. When you multiply over all the gas you're gonna have to do. And one quick note, I should say that maybe is something I could do to improve this model, and maybe I will by the time by the time you're watching this. I might do this if you're not live. I might do this in the near future, is to actually match up these numbers here for how much we're talking about when we talk about the revenues with also their gas sourcing and the cost of transporting, because those should scale together. Right now I have the liquefaction transport costs and the gas sourcing costs, assuming full phase 1 capacity, even if we're not also assuming that they actually sell it all. So that's one thing that probably could be improved, and maybe I will in the future, but I think that's at least a conservative way to do things. Anyways, getting back to the actual calculations here, I also have a parameter for what percent do you think they're going to have to pay on their debt. I put in 12%. I think that's in the ballpark, although I don't have a great idea. From that, we can calculate what their interest payment is. We can calculate their, I put in a number here for their operating expenses and their SG&A in terms of billions of dollars per year. That is actually parameters, so that should not be underlined. By the way, if I didn't mention it, everything that is underlined here is sort of a calculated value. You don't need to edit yourself. It is going to be derived from some of the other rows that you can and should edit yourself. But so we put in, take a stab at what do we think their other expenses are going to be for the year. And then in total, we can, subtract all of those costs off of their LNG revenue to come up with sort of our model for how many $1 billion per year do we think Driftwood LNG Phase 1 is going to be producing at operations. So that is kind of the bottom line. I have a little bit further down here if you want to then carry that forward into an actual valuation. And again, this is where it gets, let me delete some of these extra rows. I don't know why I had those in here. This is where it gets a bit, a bit even more outside of my realm, and why I need to really, really give the disclaimer that I am not a financial advisor, so don't look at these numbers and think that they're realistic. They could be way off. But this right here is my best attempt at turning that into an actual valuation, right? So this parameter here is, what discount rate are you going to apply to those future cash flows? How many years do you think it's going to take until operations start? And I don't think I actually got this plumbed. Oh, I guess, yeah, I didn't get this fully put into my model here. I will do that after I record this video to fix that. But this parameter here is saying, how many years do you think it's going to take from today until they actually start Driftwood LNG full operation? So I put in 4 years here, assuming that they start in, let's say, middle end of 2026, since right now it's, middle of 2022. And so then I have this line here, which does the discounted cash flow value of those 10 years of cash flows. This comes out to, billions of dollars, right? And so that's sort of the net present value of all those first 10 years of cash flows of Driftwood LNG Phase 1. From that number, that's like the sort of the base for the valuation, but then we subtract off the debt, because sort of this would be if we want to compare that against sort of enterprise value, right? You want to subtract off the debt to then get the value of the equity. And so we subtract off the debt, which again, this comes up to the parameter up top, and then that gets you to the equity value. Then when we look at how many shares are outstanding, this is actually in billions, not millions. Billions of shares outstanding, about 1.5. This pulls from some of those lines way up top in terms of how much they have to dilute to come up with the equity portion. And then, divide that out, and that gets you to your sort of current net present value, per share of Tellurian, given all of those assumptions. I also put a fun metric in here, which is the cash flow per share once operations start. So that would be $3.84 when Driftwood LNG actually starts up. But this here, if you're wanting to sort of look at what would be my current price at sort of an FID or a full notice to proceed, where the project has been, if you're not really worried about trying to sort of add an entire risk factor on top of all of this to just discount everything as sort of the stock is today, this would be this is where I'm looking at for a valuation per share. And again, this is $10.33 is a number based on all of the assumptions I have in the sheet here. You can again play around with them and change them, because there's a lot of different factors to consider in terms of what goes into this and what can really impact this, right? One other thing that I think about when I actually am thinking about my valuation for the company is also everything from row 63 and up, everything that I've shown so far is only talking about the first 10 years of Driftwood LNG Phase 1, right? That's sort of like the first step of the company, the piece that is most concrete and most tangible for us. But one of the things with Tellurian, and you've clearly seen this with other companies like Cheniere, is once they start that first chunk, right, you have those future phases and of the company that there's some value in those, right? And having that option, having the plan already in place, the team already in place, and having some cash flow that they can use to then reinvest. It makes it a much, much less risky proposition for folks to do business with them because they're not a startup that might, fail. They're an already established company and they're just sort of incrementally adding capacity. And so there's a couple things here that you might want to consider adding an additional value to, as I do. Could talk about what is the net present value of Driftwood LNG Phase 1 after those first 10 years, right? So this would be if they start in 2026, operates for 10 years. That is, what a lot of the current contracts are on. And then you look at what's the value post 2036, right? There is at least some value to that, right? That presumably the plant is not going to just, fall over and do nothing after that, right? It's going to keep producing. And so, you have to come up with how do you value that? And I just sort of plugged in numbers of like 15% of the net present value the first 10 years, right? So really discounting that a bit. But you can, again, play with this. Maybe you can set the 0 if you don't want to worry about that, or don't think that there's, much value in thinking about those things. Or you can make it higher. Again, it's all up to you. And then there's also, what is the value of those future Driftwood LNG phases, and getting them all the way up to that 27 million tons per year. And I think this is actually a lowball number, but it's super hard to reason about, right? Because it's such a risky, not really risky, an uncertain thing to really talk about post phase 1 development of Driftwood LNG. So I put this at a sort of an even smaller amount, but this could actually, if you're looking out a long term and you have a long holding period that you're targeting, right? This might end up driving much more of the value of the company in 5 to 10 years. So something to think about. You can put that in there. And what this model does here is it adds those in, and to get the sort of the full equity value, the full valuation of the equity, and then divides by that same number of shares outstanding called out above for to get sort of a full valuation of the equity in terms of the share price. So I did also have one line item here. If you want to give any additional value to the company for some additional project, I don't currently, that's even further out, I would imagine, than Driftwood LNG's, phase 3 or 4, whatever it is that actually finalizes the full 27 million tons per year plant. But there were comments in the past, in the distant past, when things seemed like they were going a little bit, sort of close to the original track of the company, like 2018, 2019 timeframe, where they did at least mention they were looking at yet another project that was not even Driftwood LNG. So that would be something that, if you think this is something that the company might have in mind, or that, maybe news comes out and you want to throw this in here real quick, there's at least that parameter that you can put something in. So that is my full walkthrough of the model. Hopefully that answered all of your questions. I know there's at least a couple folks on the stream, so if you all have questions or comments, I'm happy to hear them now. But if what you were looking for in watching this video, maybe if you're watching this after the fact, you got the link from the spreadsheet. In the future, that's my full walkthrough. And again, if you have extra questions, you can I'm gonna link this video down in here. Once the video is posted, I'll have the link. And you can add a comment to this video and I will take a look at it. You can also email me here. My email address, whoops, I don't know why that popped up, is right here. And so you can send me an email if you want. All right. So getting to the live chat, Transient Stacker says, I had a thought the other day. Suki must still have a lot of Cheniere stock, which is super high now. I wonder if he could sell his stock to use as the equity. I have no idea if he still has the Cheniere stock. Once they're no longer insiders, right? They don't have to report the sales. And I'm not sure even if when he left, if he was a 5% owner of the company or not. Yeah, so, but it's interesting. I think if he were to do that, right, it would be his money, not the company's, but he could, contribute that to the company, effectively buy additional shares. I think it's certainly possible. And I know, like, it's a good point. Cheniere stock is like going to the moon right now. I am, it's a regret of mine that I didn't buy They didn't stay in Cheniere stock after the pandemic. I bought a little bit and then I sold out of it because I for reasons that were not great. Man, I bought some in the 30s. It'd be a what a 6x now, 5x at least. Anyways, yeah, I actually don't know how much he's worth, right? And it is a little bit interesting. Just one data point there, right? We know that he obviously had a lot more Tellurian shares a couple years ago and had borrowed against them, in a margin account, and got liquidated on those during the massive drop here in the pandemic times, of Tellurian. And so I don't know, like it may be that he even if he holds a Cheniere stock, he might have pretty large margin loans against the Cheniere stock, sort of as offsetting collateral. It's hard to say. Yeah, but it would be interesting if some of the executives or some of the board members, right? I actually don't know where some of the board members stand, but I know, like, if I recall, I think it's the husband of one of the board members sort of runs a fund, and I have to imagine, if that's the case, that he's got a lot of capital, at his disposal, and they could put together some sort of a deal there. Yeah. Brian says, great explanation, Dustin. Quick question. What do you think is the market cap of Tell, just accounting for the natural gas production? That will be the margin of safety, assuming the natural gas price keeps elevated. So I did a prior video about this a while ago. Henry Hub prices were lower than they are today, even, and their production was lower. The way that I was, let me try to pull up that sheet real quick. I mean, it's a good question. The way that I was trying to do the valuation was just sort of a peer comparison against a couple other natural gas companies. I could take a look right now. So give me a moment. I'll pull up what I had done before. Yeah, Tellurian relative valuation as a gas producer. It's a great question, and that's exactly how I personally think about this in Tellurian in terms of my downside protection, right? And that's why I've made the argument. Like I said, I made a whole video in the past that and these are old numbers, right? This is from May 22nd, but I was looking at their production and look at the production of some other smaller gas producers and what the market was valuing. Like, again, I wasn't even looking at trying to do a sort of a fundamental analysis. Well, if they produce this much gas and they would make this much revenue and it costs this much, and what would be their cash flows there. I didn't go that route. All I did was looking at, what is their production capability, and then looking at other companies' production capabilities and how is the market valuing them, enterprise value divided by production capacity, and then comparing that against what Tellurian would be with their production capacity. So at the time, I was assuming that their BCF, I think this would be their BCF per year production, was only going to be 73. Is that right? I guess this must have been based off their production at the time. Yeah. And so I think as of right now, Tellurian is talking that they're going to be at a run rate capacity of, let me look it up. I want to say it was 250, although maybe I'm misremembering. Let's see. They did just talk about this in their most recent press release, right? They said, click to read more. Oh, no, there it was. 250. The new wells are expected to increase. The new wells, and they're talking about this year. Right, the 11 wells currently being drilled or completed, all of which TPC expects to turn to sales before the end of this year, right? So these new wells, again, that are expected to turn to sales before the end of this year, are expected to increase their production rate to approximately 250 MMCF per day. Right, so 250, so 0.25 BCF per day times 365 would be 91. That's right. I'm getting my numbers off. So using some older numbers, that would be 91. And based off of these, again, old valuations that I had, that would put their predicted market cap. Oh, this was in their future if they kept driving up their production. So sorry, that's a bad way. Sorry, I'm trying to do this on the fly. But I think that's the model that I had, right? That's the way that I was thinking about this. If we look at a couple of these, right? Let's maybe look at over these CNX. And so right now, just doing some quick napkin math, if I'm looking back, my previously I had said that they are producing 590 BCF per year. And so they currently have a $3.4 billion market cap. At the time they had, they were even slightly higher at the time. That's a little surprising. So maybe these numbers are still close to the ballpark. So I guess maybe if I look at my 91 here, that does up. Yeah, I don't remember what all my numbers were here. Sorry. I don't have an immediate answer for you. Sorry, Brian. I try to look at my stuff and I'm a little, I'm lost. I'd have to bring myself back up to speed on what I was doing here. But I think it is a very good way to look at things and a very good way to, it's a great point because it is true that your downside is protected, right? In a way that, I'm also invested in Next Decade, right? Full transparency. I have a smaller position there than I do in Tellurian. But I think that is one of the ways in which, a company like Next Decade is a lot riskier where, if whatever happens tomorrow and the market for the appetite for new LNG exports from the US dries up for some reason, and Next Decade can't get over the finish line to build their facility, they got nothing, right? They're a plan on a piece of paper, and Tellurian, because by virtue of having operations, they are just a much less risky company, right? Like they'd have to completely restructure the company if they were going to be, quote unquote, just a gas producer. But I think it is at least, it's an operating company that it's an operating company, so there's at least still something there, right? Your equity doesn't go to zero, overnight. And I actually would argue that at its lowest points, when Tellurian was hitting what, like 50 cents, I don't remember, in 60 cents, 50 cents, somewhere in there, I think even valuing it as a gas producer, it was undervalued, right? And I think that's just because not very many people were even thinking about that. So that way of valuing the company at the time. Brian says that is an interesting way to compare with natural gas producers. Thanks. Yeah, it's the best way that I had, right? This is me trying to say, like, I don't currently have a great way to model this out and really think of, how much is gas going to be worth, right? Because I can look at what are Henry Hub prices, what are Henry Hub future prices, but I think the best way, the best way to do that is just going to be a pure valuation and then sort of scale it up or down based on what their production is. And I think I didn't quite get the numbers to work out on this particular stream, and I'm sorry for that. But I think what I was doing before was I said, here's their current production rate, but I was looking at what these producers are being valued at given their level of production. At least the expected level of production they have at the end of 2022. And then I said, Tellurian could ramp up their gas production pretty rapidly relative to their current size, right? Like they could actually get from, 73 where they were at the time to, probably 200 or 300 BCF in not that long, right, in a couple of years. And so I was looking at what would they probably be valued at, right? This is the observation that I think Tellurian, if they were just focused on natural gas, would probably grow their natural gas production, much faster, just because they don't actually produce that much right now, right? They could grow it pretty substantially in a year or two and then catch up to sort of the valuation they have here. And then the market being forward looking would give them credit for that. So Yep. Brian says that's a good point. Makes a lot of sense. I'll watch your old video. Great. Cool. Does anybody else, either of you, or if there's anyone else in the stream who's been quiet? This app is so annoying that it doesn't actually show me who's on the stream all the time. I wish it did, but if there is anybody else, I'm happy to take questions or comments. Otherwise, I am gonna hop off. I will give if there happens to be anybody else, that is watching this after fact and is still watching this far into the video, I do these videos in the evening time and Eastern US time zone. Ends up being 10 or 11 p.m. somewhere in that vicinity. And I did them all, at least so far, I do them all as live streams, and I'm happy to have folks hop on the chat. And sorry, and I don't get to these every day. I don't usually get to these Friday or Saturday night. Every other night of the week is at least a possibility, although I'm trying to standardize maybe on at least making sure I hit Sundays and Thursdays as usual, sort of usual days that I try to always hit. I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a little bit harder during the week. All right, Transient Stacker says no coffee talk lately. Speculation, I think they must be working hard on financing, as Suki said, it's crunch time. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else he's gonna hop on there and talk about, right? I think maybe that's a part of it, is just that the company, it's crunch time, and more to the point, it's time to either get it done or stop talking about the fundamentals, right? As much as we all like to talk of, it's a meme or it's a joke, talking about the fundamentals on a global basis, right? It's at this point everybody knows the fundamentals are fantastic, right? And it's almost even shooting themselves in the foot to talk about how fantastic the fundamentals are, because it really just reminds you that yes, this is the best possible environment that you could have dreamed of, and they still don't have everything wrapped up and done. So I would love it if he's not talking because they're in a quiet period, or because he's so busy wrapping everything up, and maybe he's traveling and meeting with the people he needs to be in the room with and shake the hands, sign the documents. Obviously, I hope that's the case, and obviously I'm optimistic on the company, and I do think they're going to get over the finish line, right? I think as much as it's crunch time on a global basis, Brian says, yeah. Man, yes, the on a global basis jokes are never gonna get old. At least assuming we all get rich from this. If they don't end up, that's gonna be just a painful joke. Anyways, but I think as much as we can be frustrated they haven't gotten it done yet, it's still true that the macro environment is phenomenal for this, and they're under construction. They've got a lot of cash on the balance sheet. They've got resources. I should say they have options at this point, right? Even if something falls through, I think they can come up with a plan B and go forward. It may not be quite as good for shareholders as it otherwise would be, but I mean, I think they have such the macro environment is so good, and their particular, if they can even keep their current sales and purchase agreements, right? I think if you look at the projections for JKM and TTF, the profits that we could be seeing from those over the next 5 to 10 years might hide a lot of other mistakes that could happen in the process right now. That's one thing to call out, right? Again, just going back to the model, I put in numbers here, but I think some of these, I put in 20 or 18 and 30 for the JKM and TTF prices.